Confucius once said, "We all have two lives, and the second begins when you realize you only have one self." Gardner is a music teacher who dreams of playing in a jazz band one day, but he doesn't eat his dreams. At the moment, he works in a modest school giving music classes, waiting for the moment when his opportunity comes. One day an opportunity comes, but it's not the one I expected. The principal of the school informs Joe that he has been given the full-time job, which guarantees him insurance for medical expenses and pension. But instead of being excited by this news, Joe is quite discouraged, since he knows that accepting the offer will take him away from his true dream to be a professional jazz player and play. Along with his idols, the one who is happy about the news is Joe's mother, since she believes that this is the best for his son's life. That is, a source of safe and stable income. For a moment, Joe thinks about telling him that he is going to reject the offer, but seeing his mother so insistent, he ends up resigning and tells him that he will accept the position in It's a Call Changes Joe's Destiny Forever. On the other end of the phone is a former student of Joe, who now plays for the band of Defeat Williams, a woman Joe admires. His former student invites him to play in a show that same night, since they need hands on the piano. Joe tries to contain his emotions so that his mother doesn't find out and runs towards the rehearsal. When he arrives, he meets Dorothea, who orders him to play to test his skills. At first, the teacher has problems. However, he gets carried away and begins to improvise a piano solo in a masterful way that leaves everyone surprised, so Dorothea accepts him in the band and quotes him that same day at 19:00 at night. Joe leaves overflowing with joy, since he will finally achieve the dream that had been president for so long. He thinks he will finally be able to start enjoying life, and he thinks he will now start living, but while talking on the phone, he suddenly falls into a sewer and he dies. Immediately afterwards, we see Joe's soul ascend on a kind of path that heads towards an incandescent light. Realizing that this is definitive death, that is, the afterlife, Joe gets scared. He tries to run in the opposite direction, colliding with the other souls who are heading towards his end, while a phrase is also said that I want you to remember very well. I will not die just when my life is beginning. He tries to jump, but a barrier stops him. The man does not give up and fights with all his strength until he finally falls into the void. After a somewhat confusing descent, he lands in a field where there are thousands of souls, babies who have not yet been born into it. That Jerry, who defines himself as the combination of all quantum states and tells him that he is not dead, his body is simply in the waiting process. Joe asks him what all this is, and Jerry explains that the place he is in is called the Great Before, or also known as the Self-Seminary. And in a moment, I explain to you well what is done here. Joe realizes that souls are born or come to Earth through a portal in which he sees an opportunity to return to fulfill his dreams. So he tries to jump, but no matter how hard he tries, he always returns to the same place. In it, Jerry mistakes Joe for someone else and assigns him the role of mentor. At first he resists, since he is not interested, but seeing that his other option is literally death, he prefers to pretend it is one. Then they do not go to a room along with the other mentors, to whom they explain the workings of this site. The Great Before, or the Self-Seminary, is a place designed to assign to unborn souls unique personality traits, such as being pleasant, skeptical, outgoing, or irritable. Once these traits are given, they are assigned a mentor, who helps the baby souls find their spark. You can find this in the Hall of Everything on Earth Can Inspire You, or you can find it in the Hall of the Self, where you can see the life of your mentor can serve as inspiration. Once they find their spark, a path to Earth was completed, and now they can do it. Upon hearing the latter, Joe comes up with a plan to help a soul get his spark, just to steal his pass so he can play jazz with Dorothea that same night, which he says will change his life. However, Joe was presented with a big problem. The soul assigned to him is the most apathetic and rude that has been seen in this place. Her name is 22, and she has been trapped in the Self-Seminary longer than she can remember because she refuses to find her spark because the idea of having to go to Earth to live abhors her. Mentors of the most categories, such as Muhammad Ali, Carl Jung, or Mother Teresa of Calcutta, have tried to help her, but they always end up criticizing her by telling her that she will never find her spark and giving into apathy. 22. However, this soul does not have this attitude because behind the shield of apathy lies a deep fear of wasting the only opportunity it has to set foot on Earth, which will have catastrophic repercussions on everyone's lives. Joe confesses to him that they mistook him for a mentor, and to prove it, he shows him his job room. That is, his museum with the most important moments of his life. In this room, there are memories that stand out and bring you joy. Joe, one of them is, when I was in a youth rap group full of enthusiasm and energy. But there is one memory that is especially important to him, the day he fell in love with jazz as a child. It was at that moment that he knew what his purpose in life was. That's what Joe understands as spark, but outside of those two happy moments, there's practically nothing. The rest of the memories are of rejection, failure, and disenchantment with his work, but above all of a lot of loneliness. Seeing this, the man is flooded with melancholy and exclaims sadly, "My life was meaningless." At the end of the tour, he sees himself in a coma, in a hospital bed about to lose his life. Contemplating the possibility of his own death, Joe realizes that he cannot allow his life to end like this empty, so Joe proposes something to 22. He helps 22 find his spark, and she gives him her pass. In this way, Joe returns to Earth to start his life, and 22 stays forever in the Great Before, managing to skip that part of living that overwhelms him so much. That is a win-win for both of them. Joe shows him 22 that his spark is playing the piano is what he was born for, but 22 music doesn't cause him any sensations, so they go to the living room completely for the soul to find your spark. Here they try different types of activities such as painting, practicing gymnastics, or doing chemistry, but none of them convinces 22. They also try to cook, but souls have no touch, smell, taste, so it doesn't seem like much to him either. However, Joe has to hurry to get that step to Earth, since a being named Terry wants to find him to finish him off. Terry is the soul counter. He makes sure that no one misses and everyone goes great afterwards, but he has just realized that Joe escaped, so he has started the capture of the professor. That is, in other words, he is going to chase him to, now, end his life minutes later. 22. Show your friend a secret place where maybe he can return to Earth. They enter a dark place that takes them to a kind of limbo called the Zone, a special place where people arrive when they are completely absorbed in an activity they are passionate about. This is where humans experience what is called a flow state, a sense of being so focused and immersed in what the rest of the world is doing seems to fade. Nothing else matters at that moment, more than the activity they have at hand, whether playing music, painting, playing sports, or any other act that completely fills them. In this place they meet Munwin, a soul who has the ability to travel between the spiritual world and the physical world at will. On the spiritual, he is a hippie who navigates this space and helps lost souls reconnect with his body. And on the physical plane, he is a man who promotes a store in New York, which is right where Joe is. Hearing all this, Joe asks him for help to return to his body, and a Windows accepts. They open a portal in which Joe manages to find himself in a hospital bed along with a therapy cat. He is so close to being able to return that he gets excited as well and jumps back to Earth, but by accident 22 also falls with him. The problem here is that because of a mistake in the landing, the soul of Joe fell into the body of the cat, and the soul of 22 ended up in the body of Joe. That is, the cat tries to explain to the doctors the situation, but of these they only hear howls, and 22 in the body of Joe tries to tell the doctors what happened. Before he has used a human body, so his movements are extremely clumsy. Despite this, they manage to reach the reception, and the moment they go out into the street, the excess of stimuli completely overwhelms them. 22, who had never in his life experienced so many sounds, smells, and sensations at the same time. This, far from being an enjoyable experience, becomes something terrifying. The panic is so great that he ends up hiding in a corner and declares that he will stay there until Joe's body dies. The teacher urgently needs to find Munwin, since in 6 hours it will be his presentation, so he comes up with a plan, steals a piece of pizza, and takes it 22, and the soul is immediately fascinated by the smell, and at the moment that the test 22 is amazed. Let us remember that souls in the great before were incapable of feeling, so you are experiencing for the first time in your life the sensation of savoring and enjoying eating now calmer. 22, he gets up and continues on his way. Finally, they find Munbuendia, and he even tells them that in order to return to 22 to the great before and Joe or his original body, they need to do an astral shift. But the action can only be executed when the planets align, or as the government says, at 6:30 H, that is, half an hour before the long-awaited presentation. Joe remains to be seen in the jazz club, and Joe, along with 22, leave to go to the apartment to advance the preparations. They have a taxi, but when they open the door, Dorothea Williams herself gets off, who when seeing Joe is extremely disconcerted. The professor climbs 22 into the taxi, and they start to end the moment of shame. When they arrive at the apartment, Joe worries about what his idol is going to think of him and orders 22 to put his pants on. However, 22 has his attention on other things, such as understanding why certain parts of his human body smell funny. That's when the door knocks. It's a student of Joe's who comes to tell him that she's fed up with looking for jazz and is going to quit the school band. The teacher tells 22 to ignore her. However, 22 disobeys him and goes out to talk a little with the girl, leaving Joe locked up. The girl and 22 sit on the stairs, and the student shows who she thinks is her teacher what she has been practicing. When he starts 22, he is fascinated, not so much by how well he does it, but by the passion and happiness he conveys while doing it. When her student turns 22, she motivates her to continue practicing, so the girl retracts her desire to quit and leaves very happy. 22 is very intrigued by the complexity of human emotions and asks Joe why he decided not to give up. What the teacher answers is that it is because his student loves music, but before continuing explaining, he stops to return once more to the topic of the exchange of bodies, since it is the only thing that worries him. The teacher begs 22 to help him solve the problem, and the soul accepts, but with one condition, that he let him try some things in life to see if by experimenting with the world he can find his spark. Joe says yes, and they get to work. He bathes, brushes his teeth, and learns to put on his socks, but when he cuts his hair, he makes a big mistake. Joe turns on the machine, stops on a stack of records, and when he gets close, he stops. Removing some of her hair slips, shaves a portion of hair and destroys the machine. Only 5 hours left until the presentation, and now Joe's image is a disaster. He can't make it that night, so they'll go with someone who can help us. His name is Deez. He's been Joe's barber for a long time, and according to the professor, that's his spark. It says it's a purpose since it's so good for that. Joe and 22 enter, and Dees greets him very kindly. When 22, Sora sits on a pallet and realizes that being on it is a nice experience. For many, the things that 22 is experiencing may be mundane, insignificant, but this soul has eyes with a great capacity for amazement, and every moment seems to be something special. However, Joe, with his worries and nerves, tells him to stop fantasizing and focus. The barber notices that the cat is very upset, so he tells Joe's body, i.e. 22, that if the cat doesn't calm down, he will have to take it out, so Joe has no choice but to keep 22. On the contrary, he starts talking and everyone in the place is interested in what he has to say. He has literally lived with the smartest people in history, so his topics of conversation are much broader and more interesting than Joe's, which he reduces exclusively to music and jazz. I mean, the only thing he cares about in the world. When Des finishes cutting his hair, he tells him that his true passion wasn't being a barber, but he still leads a very happy life, which leaves Joe quite pensive. At the end of the cut, the friends say goodbye, and Des thanks 22 for the conversation by telling him the following: "I'm glad that we're finally talking about something that wasn't jazz." These simple words are little by little opening Joe's eyes, making him see that perhaps he is very obsessed with that topic. There are 4 hours left for Joe to fulfill his dream, and apparently everything is going well. However, behind this couple is Terry, who is getting closer and closer to capturing them both, and frustrating. Everything I'm going to fight for. 22 and Joe walk down the street. The professor is in a hurry and focused on his plan to recover his body and achieve his goal. But 22, the same urgency is not noticeable. This is interacting with the everyday things of the world around her. Flyers in desserts, the reflection of clean glass, the sound of metal, and the currents of sewer area. At first, Joe tries to stop her, but seeing her emotion, he also smiles. However, a small disaster occurs here. 22. He loses his hat, and when he bends down to pick it up, he tears his pants. Worry and shame flood the teacher. Time is running out, and he has to hurry to fix his pants. The problem here is that the only person who can fix it is Joe's mother, and this woman doesn't know that her son is thinking of playing in a jazz band, as if she finds out there would be trouble. However, the professor has no choice, so he decides to set off on the road. Joe can only think of the conflict that awaits him when he arrives with his mother and how he can lie to her so she doesn't know what he's about to do. But 22 has her mind on a street musician who has talent and passion, which impresses her. The subway is coming, so get on. For Joe, it is another trip, but for 22, it is a new and fun experience, Joe complains. Being that it is a disgusting place and every day is the same, but he assures that after tonight he goes on stage, all his problems will be solved and he will become a new Joe Gardner, believes that his whole life is going to change after fulfilling his dream. But reality is going to be another fact, that he is about to leave us a very valuable choice. They arrive at Joe's mother's tailor shop, and both he and 22 find themselves extremely nervous. They go in with her to try to disguise the facts, but Joe's mother, very disappointed, tells her that she already knows that her son is going to play with Dorothea. When Joe asks him to fix his costume for the show, his mother refuses to help him, expressing her frustration. Because Joe has never wanted to accept a permanent and stable job, choosing instead to pursue what she considers an unattainable dream. However, this time, instead of fleeing, Joe decides to confront her using his ability to communicate through 22, who is temporarily in control of his body. Joe finally opens up and tells his mother not to sit supported. His mother tells him that his father was also a musician, and that caused many financial problems for the family, and she doesn't want her son to go through the same thing. Joe responds that music is all he thinks about, but his mother responds with a scathing comment, "Dreams can't be eaten," to which Joe, "So, I don't want to eat." Joe's mother, like many parents, could be dealing with her own version of transmitted trauma, where the fears and unresolved struggles of one generation try to avoid in the next. His resistance is a form of care that seeks to prevent Joe from repeating the same story as his father. It is the love of a mother who wants the best, but her mission to do the best is stained by the scars of past difficulties. Joe goes on and explains to her that it's not just about her career, it's about her reason for living. And at that moment, Joe remembers when he saw himself in the living room, where on the verge of death and with a life that had not been meaningful to him. Later, he opens his heart and confesses the following: "To the woman who gave him life, it scares me to say that if I died today, my life would have meant nothing." These words break his mother's heart, but they also open her eyes, so she finally decides to help him. While parental guidance is crucial for their children's development, it must be balanced with space for children to explore and pursue their own dreams. Because if not, children may become dependent on their parents' approval and fail to develop effective coping skills or generate frustration and resentment towards those who try to protect them. The process of letting go is psychologically challenging for parents, as it involves trusting their children's resilience and choices. But let us remember that providing support does not mean abandoning concern for their well-being, but rather recognizing and valuing the child's individuality and their right to forge their own path, even if that path is full of uncertainty. With the new suit, her maternal relationship fixed, and 1 hour left for Joe to fulfill his dream.
This couple walks to the club where they met Mundo to exchange bodies. This is only in theory, as Terry has other plans for the fate of both of them. Joe is happy his dreams will finally come true. 22. At the beginning, he also shows a good attitude, but everything changes when he sits down to contemplate a little. I see a father playing with his daughter, 2 women
has changed, then he tells him that maybe walking or seeing the sky can be his spark. However, Joe cruelly discourages her, telling her that those are not purposes, it is simply an ordinary life. Since let's remember that for Joe, the spark is synonymous with your passion or your purpose in the world. At that, Muin arrives and tells them that everything is ready for the change of bodies, but suddenly 22 refuses completely and begins to run away. Joe has a dream to fulfill, so he chases his body through the streets until he reaches the subway. However, Terry is following them, ready to capture them. When 22 thinks he will escape, the counter opens a portal outside this plane, and both 22 and Joe fall into the trap. Their souls break away from their bodies and return to the great before, where they both begin to fight. Joe is furious because he just missed the chance of a lifetime, and 22 is upset because he was about to find his spark. They both think it's over. However, Jerry is surprised to see that there is a pass to Earth in 22's chest, which means that he finally managed to find his spark. But far from being a happy moment, it turns into a tense situation. Joe chides him that the only reason he got it was because he was living his life taking away all the credit, 22, and reinforcing the false belief that all his previous mentors had instilled in him, that it serves no purpose or purpose. When Joe is about to leave, 22 throws the pass to Earth, and when Earth picks it up to throw it back, 22 is no longer there. Joe proceeds to use it to return to his body, but before leaving, he asks Jerry what was the purpose or spark of 22. Biology, music, walking, what was he born for? However, Jerry just mocks and tells him the spark is not the purpose. Upon hearing this, Joe's face changes completely. He claimed that his spark was music, but now he is very confused. However, he soon discovered, look what it really means to find the spark. He only has 5 minutes left to reach his touch. So he jumps to the ground, falls in his body, and runs to the jazz club where he had met Dorothea. But while this is happening, something terrible is happening to 22. Joe's hurtful comments have caused the poor soul to go to limbo and become a lost soul, which is about to have serious consequences for her and Joe as well. But for the moment, Joe has bigger problems, as when he enters the club, Dorothea tells him that he has arrived too late and has hired a substitute. Walk them. Joe can no longer give up, so he stands firm and tells the woman, my only purpose on this planet is to play the piano. It is my mission, and nothing is going to stop me. These words finally convince Dorothea and give her the opportunity that Joe had been waiting for so long. When he is alone, he looks in the mirror for a few seconds and says to himself a phrase that I want you to remember very well. Get ready. Joe Gardner, your life is about to begin. Now, yes, his dream has come true. That night, Joe leaves his soul on stage and enjoys the moment he had longed for all his life. He plays in a spectacular way in a professional band along with one of his greatest idols in the musical genre that most. That night, even her mother attended, and she couldn't be prouder. Dorothea turns to Joe to say, welcome to the band. Last night ends, the members say goodbye, and Dorothea and Joe are left alone on the street. What do you ask the woman? And now what's next? To which the woman responds, we will come back tomorrow and do it again. And upon hearing these words, Joe's smile is erased. He has been waiting for this moment all his life, and even though he believed that both he and his life would change completely, after that day he still feels like the same Joe. Dorothea comes a little closer and tells him a story that can change the life of more than one. And he says like this, one day a young fish approached an old man and asked him, I'm looking for that thing that the ocean tells him. The old fish told him he was right in it, to which the young fish responded, This is just water. What I want is the ocean. After telling him, Dorothy takes a taxi and leaves, leaving Joe with a giant void. That night, when he returns home after having achieved what they had frozen so much, he realizes that nothing has changed. It's still the same Joe in the same subway, in the same apartment, which is still just as empty. He sits at his piano and pulls out all the things that 22 was collecting during his stay in Joe's body. Does he try to play some notes, but a doubt eats him away? If the spark is not the purpose, then what is the spark? Symbolically, Joe sets aside his piano score and in its place puts all the objects that 22 together, seemingly insignificant things. But behind every one of them is something that made 22 fall in love with being alive. As he sees them, he understands it and begins to remember what 22 saw with his eyes, how fascinated he was by the subway musician, how happy he was after seeing his new cut and his mother's love when he handed him his dad's sack, the drafts, the blue sky, and how happy he became when he saw the girl play with these memories of 22. Joe finally manages to realize what the spark means. The spark is those times you spent with your mother when you were a child or with your father when they shared things together. They are things as big as fireworks or as small as enjoying your favorite food. The spark is the moments in which you share and transmit to others. What makes you passionate about La Chispa is spending days with your family, feeling the sea at your feet and sharing moments with those you love? Or is it enjoying ordinary moments that with a little awareness can become magical? Since the spark is all those little moments that are worth living for, Joe all the time thought that the spark was the purpose, or what you are supposed to come into the world for. In his case, the piano in a jazz group. But he has just realized that he was always wrong, and his obsession with getting it right was so great that he gave his life to it. That's why Joe's action of removing the sheet music from the piano and putting 22's objects in their place was so important because it symbolizes that Joe is renouncing the belief that his existence is defined by a specific purpose. The spark is human existence in its purest essence and is not limited to a single thing as an activity, but can manifest itself in various ways and at various times in our lives. Is the spark that which escapes reason and which cannot be named or defined, those small moments and experiences, many times apparently insignificant, that make us think, is it worth living? In essence, the spark is. Life itself, Joe continues to play the piano until he enters the state of flow and enters the area for the purpose of explaining 22, everything he has understood, but Monwyn tells him that will not be possible, as 22 has become a lost soul. They try to help her, but she resists and knocks down the ship, sinking Monwyn with it. Joe follows her and tries to talk to her, but the soul turns into some kind of monster and returns to the Garnets, causing chaos. It is not an aggressive being, it is a being that is afraid. When Joe approaches again, 22 devours him there, inside the giant. We realize the truth. It is as if the inside of that monster were a materialization of 22's damaged mind. She finds herself trapped in a cycle of harmful thoughts and ideas about herself and excessive self-criticism. But this way of thinking did not appear out of nowhere. It has largely been caused by the mentors that 22 has had throughout his life. The way others see us and how they treat us can have a profound impact on our perception of ourselves. When authority figures and mentors in life 22 constantly tell her that she is no good at all, these opinions are internalized and become part of her self-perception, which is why she sees them almost as if they were monsters, values, or nightmares, because every negative comment has hurt her, making her believe that she has no value and will never be able to live. That's why she always had an apathy about going down to earth, not because she found it boring, as she said, but because she was afraid she wouldn't be good enough to live. Finally, Joe manages to give him the simple seed that fell from the tree, a symbol that reminds him of the moment he understood how beautiful it could be to be alive, and is immediately transported to that moment. There, Joe explains the meaning of the spark and tells him that it is good for living, thus changing the harmful belief that had been planted in him. When he understands everything, the mental torment he was feeling fades away. Joe picks up the pass to Earth and gives it to 22 as she is now ready to live. It's only one pass, so that means I will die, but the professor tells him it doesn't matter because he already lived here. It seems important to me to highlight that the passage to Earth is not completed by finding your purpose, which indicates that we did not come to this world to fulfill a defined purpose, because life has no purpose beyond what you want to give it, except to live, since this is an end in itself.
Then you take a human and the mentor by accident, and his student, without wanting them, jump together to Earth. After flying a bit, Joe separates 22 and returns to the big afterwards, i.e., ultimate death. But just as he's about to leave, Joe stops him and offers him a second chance. And at the moment, Joe happily accepts. Before leaving, Joe asks him, "Now what are you going to do with your life?" To which Joe responds, "I don't know. Life is achievement. Always wanting to achieve a big goal. Life is experience. Just the goal. Experiences your life and the sensations you experience. This seems to be quite a fundamental message of the story. As we saw, Joe was not happy with his life, and he fully enjoyed it because he thought it would once he changed his world. He managed to play in a jazz group with a basic and he would be able to begin to live. He was preparing himself so much to live that he forgot to live. You can tell this from Joe's attitude during the movie. Ultimately, he is enjoying and marveling at the simple things in life. Joe is obsessed with fulfilling his wish without stopping, wanting a more feeling, and with his freedom and ability to start living.
He realized that happiness is not a destination that is reached, but a series of moments and experiences that are lived along the way. So combining this with the story of the fish, Joe understood that what he had perceived as simple everyday moments in his search, that is, simple water, were actually part of the ocean of life in which he had always been immersed. And I want to make it clear that it seems excellent to me to have goals and objectives, which achieving that makes us walk towards a better place and be better people. What seems inaccurate to me is to believe that happiness or life itself begins when you achieve that great goal, when that great trip arrives, when I meet that person at home, when you finally graduate or find that dream job. I think we have to be aware that life is here and now, and that the nice things that are worth living for, those sparks that are happening all the time, let us not let the idea of a greater purpose rob us of the only opportunity we have to set foot on this planet and enjoy that unique and unrepeatable experience called being alive. If you want me to tell and reflect on your favorite story or answer questions or comments, you can become a member of the channel by clicking below where it says Join. This will give you access to many exclusive benefits, plus you will be immensely supporting the channel. If you want to see more stories, reflections, and interpretations of stories, you can take a walk through the canal. If you search a little, you may find your favorite story, and in case you didn't know, I have 3 published books that you can order from anywhere in the world. Below I leave you the link. Thank you very much for your support. See you in the next video.